welcome to our first elemental episode, the Lithium episode. This was a fun brainchild of mine. I really liked my whole, artistic perspective, where I wanted to start with how lithium is made in stars and end with how it arrives in our pill dispensers and in our brains. I think that was a bit monumental of a goal.
You got really close to making like a drag path song edit of Lithium.
Yeah, I did.
Your love for it was very clear.
I like Lithium. What can I say? And honestly, I just watched Project Hail Mary, and they've been having a lot of fun with different elements. I know in that movie, not a lot of stuff makes sense from a chemistry perspective. They found a way to turn xenon into a crystallite, and they are creating canisters with it. But I was like, I wonder what lithium would do in that environment. And actually, one of the reasons why they put the astronauts in the coma in the book is because the psychiatrist they consulted with didn't think that the moods of the astronauts would be stable enough for long space travel for years.
Interesting.
But that's without lithium. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe if they had a little lithium.
Yeah. So
who knows?
Aeronautical psychiatry, astronautical psychiatry, is there a lithium budget on the International Space Station? We do not cover that in the episode, but we do.
Can we do labs in space?
But if you want to learn actually how lithium comes from the universe, how it goes into batteries, and actually how we found it from the ground and use it to treat our mental illnesses, all that is going to be covered in the episode.
Enjoy.
How to be patient.
And welcome back to How to Be Patient, where we have another Preston episode in store for you. So strap in or lock it down, whatever you do to stay in your seat, including you, Margaret, because we've got a wild lithium ride ahead of us.
I'm looking forward to it. Listeners, let us know if you like these differently led episodes, because we like them. Do they?
I know they like them. They don't have an option.
Spoken like a psychiatrist. I'm sorry to redact.
Yeah, coming off, we spent the whole last episode talking about how evil psychiatrists were. Yeah, guys, we like them, so if you enjoy them, we're going to keep doing them. And if you don't like them, we do it for us anyways. That's why we do the podcast in the first place. It was always for us.
Called service. Customer service.
I just had this realization the other day, and I made a post about it, that even if I was making enough off of TikTok or this podcast to leave my main job, I don't think I would want to. I would hate just being dependent on content, because having your full-time job gives you the freedom to say what you want to say and create in the way that you want to. You have permission to make bad art because you don't need to depend on it for your livelihood.
Yeah. I mean, I think I wonder how I would if I was in a career where I truly hated the career. I maybe would feel differently, but yeah, I think it's so much pressure on your creativity, or especially because so many people start making content for fun, that it's unless you hate your job or you get so famous or so successful that it's impossible for some reason to do both.
Like Brittany Broski, that happened to her, right?
Yeah, but she also, I don't think, loved her job. She worked maybe in finance, at a bank. Brittany Broski, if you hear our podcast.
Yeah, you're a trailblazer.
Dr. Kombucha Girl, if you want to talk to some mental health professionals, let us know.
Yeah, that I understand that. I'm also in a privileged position, in medicine, really stable job. Most of the time it's rewarding rather than corporate America. Yeah. Which may be more soul-sucking than the content grind. I think my ultimate point is just, if you want to get someone to hate their artwork, pay them for it,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I also feel sometimes people who make content, they don't actually like the thing they're making or talking about. And I think I made a video about this week also, of just why am I trying to make prior I'd been trying to make content that I'm sometimes I like watching it, but I hate filming myself doing a routine or something. And I like creators like that, but I hate it. like, I actually hate it. I'm like, this is and it's not an insecurity. It's just like, this is intrusive to me. Like, I just want to wear whatever pajamas I'm wearing. I don't want to film myself waking up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so much to film those routines. Like I try to make these like coffee videos, and honestly, like it's a calming ritual to make my coffee, and it's totally disrupted when I like try to film every part of it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm chopping up my life and trying to sell it to someone. Where I'd
Yes.
rather just, I think, experience my life.
Yeah. It does feel like that. I also realized that like I like those videos, but none of them ever stick with me. Whereas like people talking to camera who like have interesting
Mhm.
things to say or like a totally different job background are like my favorite videos that I like go back to and I find myself thinking about like 2 weeks later. So I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I trying to make
Humans like human stories. Who would have thought? Plane found in
Crazy.
sky.
It's crazy. And I was like, what am I talking about? It's like, I have 10 years of education I could talk about. How about the fact that no one can see a child psychiatrist regardless? So I could talk about that.
Yeah, we've got lots to talk about. Well, today's a Preston episode, and I did not make an icebreaker. I just tried to like ease it in there by sharing at the beginning.
Yeah, which was, bold as we've never actually had a conversation off camera, listeners.
Yeah, no, this is the first time.
How would you rate it?
Pretty good.
Nailed it.
I like it so far. But if there's anything that I'd want to stabilize my mood, it would probably be some lithium salts. If I just had to guess, which is the topic of today's podcast, everything you would ever possibly need to know about lithium, which it's a pretty lofty goal. And I don't think we're going to get to all of that, but I really tried. And I had a lot of fun deep diving into everything I could find about lithium and telling its story.
Amazing.
So are you ready to begin?
I'm ready. Play the like welcome to the Charlie Chocolate Factory music.
Here we go.
And we'll get copyrighted. Don't do that.
So long ago in a galaxy far, far away, there was a Big Bang. That's where we're starting.
They're starting there.
The universe began. Yeah.
Great.
So there was actually theorized some lithium that was first created in the Big Bang, but a majority of lithium comes from stars. So I want to tell you about how we make elements. Don't laugh. This is important. We're talking about the genesis.
I didn't even audibly laugh.
lithium.
The listeners who are only listening
people
won't even
listening
know.
on audio, she's smirking at me right now.
I'm so serious. I'm ready for seriousness.
So when you think about the chemistry of the universe, there are basically protons, electrons, and neutrons. So the most simple thing you could have is just one proton and one electron floating around. Just basically the one. It's like the single Lego piece building block. That's hydrogen, right? So we have a ton of hydrogen hanging out, and hydrogen has gravity, and we have billions of years for them to slowly coalesce. And then when you get enough hydrogen, this big gas cloud together, they get so much weight that the hydrogen on the inside starts to push into itself, and then it makes a two. So you get two Lego pieces to combine, and that's nuclear fusion. So that's how you make helium, right? Because helium has two. But lithium has three, so how are we going to get there? It's kind of tough. It turns out that that's not that simple.
Choice.
So as these gas balls compress and they cause this nuclear fusion reaction in the beginning, that creates a huge explosion. It's like a nuclear bomb inside of it. So you have gravity pushing in, you have nuclear fusion pushing out, creates a ton of heat, and that's functionally what a star is. You have nuclear fusion, hydrogen to helium inside most stars. So that's kind of going over time. But then as the force keeps compounding, you start to run out of hydrogen to combine. You turn the helium, like 2 + 2, you make a 4. And then you make it 8, then you make it 12. So you get carbon and other of these like various compounds until you get up to iron. And then iron no longer undergoes nuclear fusion. So it just kind of becomes this like dead, cold rock inside of the star. And that iron rock kind of keeps expanding. And all of a sudden we have an unequal distribution of forces. So that nuclear explosion is happening in the middle. It's getting a lot weaker. But the gravity on the outside, because the mass of this whole thing hasn't changed, the gravity outside's pushing in just as hard as it was before. And eventually the scale tips, the gravity pushes all the way in, and the whole star collapses on itself. And then And then you expand everything. So you start with a black hole that turns into a supernova, basically. And in that reaction, that's when we make all the other elements, or a lot of them. So that's actually where lithium can be made, in these like supernova black hole explosions.
Got it.
There are other times where there'll be like some galaxies where you have like two stars circling each other. And as they like almost like do this dance, you get these runaway reactions on the surface. And that creates a lot of lithium too. Because you have these kind of like incomplete, like 1 + 2, 2 + 1, and those make those 3 proton compounds, which is lithium.
Gotcha.
So then all this lithium dust is in the air, explodes after these supernovas. And then the dust, just like the hydrogen, has gravity. It collects into balls, which become planets that circle suns. And then fast forward 6 billion years, we now have Earth with a ton of these weird different minerals inside of it. And there's a lot of lithium that's deposited in Earth. So where do you think we find lithium on the planet?
Like what country or like what landscape?
Either or.
I don't know country. Lithium, I assume it's in some rock somewhere.
Yeah, hell yeah, it's in a rock. It's non-trees.
This is you're
Or in
so
the
out.
ocean.
We're listeners. We're again outside of my interest.
Yeah.
Preston's like, we're gonna do a geology.
I'm speed running the physics because Margaret's just like staring blankly at me.
I'm trying not to. Okay, is it?
Yeah, so we have these.
Caves?
Yep.
Stalagmites or
Yep, stalagmites, stalactites.
This was like when I
can't
was on
remember.
a surgery rotation, they asked me what the like suture was made of, and I said wool.
Like, kinda.
They're like, no, and they all laugh. But anyway,
Yeah, that's good.
okay, where's the lithium?
So yeah, it's in these, they're called pegmatite deposits, and it's in these like sedimentary rock in a lot of wells, actually. So
So
all
well
these,
water?
a lot of natural hot springs will contain lithium. And this
Hmm.
becomes important later.
Yeah.
So the primary countries that do produce lithium and mine it from their like sedimentary rock or these pegmatite deposits are Argentina, Canada, China, the United States, and Brazil. So it's kind of all over the place. There's no like ring of fire or like colliding tectonic plates that they find all the lithium in.
Okay.
So all that being said, lithium does have some interesting chemistry that I will also breeze through because I know Margaret doesn't care about this, but I care
I
about
don't not care about it. I just like, I don't know what you want me to say during it. Because you're like, here it is. And I'm like, yes, it feels like I'm reading a textbook chapter. So I'm like, I agree. I have nothing to add.
I concur. So lithium has 3 electrons, and you remember like those orbitals where it's like electrons like to be in
1s2,
pairs.
2s2.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So we
girl, I
have
remember
1s2, 2s1. And there's nothing electrons hate more than being alone. So it's super unstable with that 2s1.
Mhm.
So all it wants to do is get rid of its electron.
Mhm.
And it's so violent when it does that if you throw lithium into water where it can discharge an electron, it will immediately burst into flames. It's just like it doesn't even have time to start like slowly burning or anything. It just like explodes.
Then how is it in springs?
So that's lithium after it's exploded.
I'm gonna get dunked in on this episode.
Yeah,
I just heard myself
no,
and I was like,
no,
did
exactly
you take
right.
organic? I literally did orgo research.
So
It's just gone from my brain, literally.
well, where the energy comes from is like the difference in stability between like the pre and post donating electron. So pre-donating, it's super unstable, but then once you form Li plus, when it's just 1s2, it's really fucking stable.
Oh, because lithium salt.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So it's in a salt form. So like lithium citrate or lithium carbonate, all things like that. The bicarbonate or whatever that was with it stole its electron, makes it super stable. So it ironically, or I guess unintuitively, how dangerous it is before it undergoes this reaction is as a commentary on how stable it is afterwards.
You love that. You love that metaphor right now for for where we're going with
I
what
love
we
how
use it for.
it's super stable.
You're like,
And
I'm
actually, we love that electron property of it for batteries. So you've probably heard of lithium ion batteries.
I have.
So because it's only got 3 protons, it's super small compared to all the other elements. Like there's only 2 elements smaller than it, right?
Yeah.
So it can pack really tightly. And it's also really good at giving away electrons, like we mentioned.
Mhm.
So that means it's great for charging and discharging. So like my electric car that I drive has lithium ions in
What
it.
brand is that?
It's a Tesla. Like, I'm not proud of that part of it, but I am proud of the lithium that
You
that
bought
I ride
it in
around
December 2024, right?
Yeah.
No, he didn't listen.
Yeah, I got
Don't
it.
dunk on him. He
I got
bought
it in
before
June
that.
2024. It was about 6 months before things got bad.
Anyway, continue. You've got
So
lithium in there. You've got
yeah, so they're
parts
great
of
for batteries,
of a
but we're not
dead
going to worry
star
about
in your car.
we're not going to worry about the batteries today. Yeah, there's stardust in my car, and I'm pretty pumped about it. Now we're going to get into how lithium affects the human body, which is the primary thing that psychiatrists care about, even though we use lithium for like a million other things. So, humans have been gravitating towards any part of the earth that has lithium for a long time. But I want to start out in Texas, actually. It's like 3 hours from where I'm at, which is really funny for me to stumble upon this. So in the mid-19th century, there were people that started making statements that their ailments had been cured when they would drink water from these wells just west of Dallas.
Hmm.
And they became known as the Crazy Water Wells. And this town of Mineral Wells, it's like about an hour drive west of like the Dallas-Fort Worth area, became like a really famous attraction for this. They even had this thing called the Crazy Water Hotel, where people would go to drink the crazy water, and it would make their depression go away or make their psychosis go away. They swore by it, and actually, in the early
that was
19th,
me at the Panera during one of my calls.
you with the charged lemonades.
Yeah.
You're like, this is my crazy waters. But it was like a big deal. Apparently, in the early 1900s, a magazine named it the nation's greatest health resort. Was this Mineral Wells Springs in Texas? And when you actually look at the compounds that are in those springs, they contain potassium, calcium, magnesium, and most abundantly lithium. Interestingly,
So they're like all the marketing lately that has been the like calming magnesium citrate or magnesium glycinate, and then they're like that and lithium. It's like
yeah, no, it's like we got potassium, calcium, mag, and lithium. And apparently people
good.
like taste the difference with the lithium. Like it has a distinct flavor to it. So that's how they could like tell. So I was like, I actually got really curious about this. So I started like looking into the math, being like, okay, are people actually like curing their illnesses with this? And it was kind of interesting. So when you look at the concentrations in any of the groundwater in that area of Texas, it's about 30 micrograms per liter. And then it can be up to like 800 micrograms per liter or even 1,300 in some of the most concentrated wells in the area. So for reference, because I know that probably means nothing in space, our 1 milliequivalent serum concentration of lithium is about 6,900 micrograms per liter. So basically, your therapeutic level of lithium, it's about 6 times more concentrated than the highest concentration of these wells. Yeah. So if you assume that in a highly concentrated well, there's about 1,000 micrograms per liter, about 1 milligram per liter, you'd have to drink 2 liters from the well a day to get about 2 milligrams of lithium per day as a dose.
And they were only drinking the water. They weren't like bathing in it.
No, they were doing everything. They're just like living in it, hanging out, breathing it in. Yeah. So when I look at that on the outset, I'm like, okay, 2 liters a day, that could be a lot. But also, if you're there for weeks, it starts to build up. It's well beyond a homeopathic dose, but it's not at our standard like 300 milligrams twice a day dose that most people would start out on. So it's almost like it's off by about a factor of 10 of what we would give someone from the pharmacy. So I mean, at first I was kind of like, I was a little bit dubious, but I'm like, honestly, they might be getting therapeutic levels of this stuff.
Well, especially when you think of the dosing we use for like the like anti-suicidality can be lower. Like I've definitely had patients who have responded on lower that weren't really like, maybe they were bipolar like 3, 4 or like cyclothymia, but they could almost reach the like a couple hundred a day.
Yeah, they probably could. And especially if it's in the groundwater too. So it's like anywhere they're getting water, and that groundwater is probably also being used to process food and other things. So it's like they're probably getting trace amounts of lithium in just like about everything they're eating that's like sourced from that area.
Right.
So if it's coming at you from all angles, like you might be might be getting a good dose of it. So that's just in Texas, though. I expanded my search and said, okay, what other hot springs in the world have this? And a ton came up. So you might have heard of like Glenwood Hot Springs in Colorado is a pretty famous one. Halcyon Hot Springs in Canada. There's the Iron Mountain Hot Springs, also in Colorado. Deep Creek in California. There's specific Lithia Hot Springs in Oregon, Arizona. And then there's also some geothermal springs in Tibet, Germany, and Indonesia.
Podcast trip to Tibet.
To go sit in the lithium
Let's go
springs.
Patreon episode.
That would actually be so hype.
We'll do a retreat.
I want to know what lithium. I didn't find any this in my research, but I had attendings tell me that there are old stories in Indonesia and like India where people would go to these hot springs as like spiritual retreats because it would help them calm down and calm their mind, and they're really highly concentrated with lithium.
Well, yeah, I mean, like in like Catholicism alone, there's like a bunch of stories of places that like probably not all of them had lithium in it, but like healing waters. It's like this is a pool that all of these people suddenly got better at. You do wonder like what was in those that we just didn't know, similar to these.
Yeah. And the thing
and
is,
then also a bubble bath is a nice experience.
It really is. Combine both of them. People are good at doing stuff that makes them feel better. You know,
like little rats.
People gravitate towards the stuff that works. Yeah. And if the earth is your cage and people are gravitating towards these hot springs, it's for a reason. So what's fascinating is like people go to these springs for their mood benefits and their health benefits and other things. But the first time that we started proposing lithium in medicine was not for our mental health. Do you want to guess what it was for?
Was it for thyroid stuff? No,
Also
that's just
no.
what we found out. No, what was it?
It's for gout.
Oh, why? What was the what was the mechanism?
Super interesting. Okay, so this guy in 1847 in London, Alfred Baring-Garrett, he was studying
he sounds like he has
rheumatology. Yeah. And he was looking at all these gout patients and he was like, when I look in their blood, I find these like uric acid crystals. So he was like, maybe lithium could help break up the gout, was his thought.
Like,
and he also
like the chemical properties of it.
Yeah,
like you said, like
exactly.
They won't form the crystals.
So a little bit on how lithium interacts with a gout crystal. So gout is formed by uric acid, which is sodium monourate, right? Or monosodium urate, sorry. Sodium is one step below lithium on the periodic table. So that sodium, a monosodium urate, it can precipitate in like, when precipitate, I mean like it forms a solid in a liquid solution. But when lithium reacts to it, it forms lithium urate, which is much more soluble.
Oh, and soluble. And well, yeah. Okay.
So lithium is basically going to shove sodium out of the way because it cares more about getting rid of its electron. We're simplifying a lot here, but essentially it will react with it, displace the sodium, be like, get out of the way, sodium. I'll handle it from here. And then it starts dissolving the uric acid. So like lithium will literally dissolve uric acid, it's a pretty cool feature of it. The other thing
So did it work?
Yeah, it did work.
Oh.
And this is a common thing. We find that like lithium is effective for this stuff, but the reason that it's not used and was stopped being used is because everyone would keep getting lithium toxicity.
Yeah.
So we'd be like, oh, let's blast them with lithium for their gout. Oh, fuck, they're getting lithium toxicity.
Like, this is worse, actually. I'll take the gout. I'll take...
So the other thing is like when they would get kidney stones or like uric acid kidney stones. So not only does it bind to and destroy the gout or dissolve the gout, but it also pulls a lot more water into your collecting ducts or your nephrons, right? Because you don't excrete lithium once you filter it out. So it's osmotically pulls in water into your urine, so you have more dilute urine. And that also helps with the treatment of stones. So it's kind of a little bit of both. As we know, and then, it's not a bug, it's a feature, I guess, so to speak. But then with the lithium poisoning, most people would end up just having a lot of polyuria, polydipsia, dehydration, because they're just pissing out so much water because the lithium is just carrying it through. So that part helps with the stones, but being dehydrated doesn't. So we've been using it for gout for like 40, 50 years or so. And then it starts to get mainstream, and the like soda and supplement companies start to get wind of it in the early 1900s.
They already had cocaine in there. Add in a little bit of the
Yeah.
lithium.
Yeah, exactly. Remember, at this time in the early 1900s, in the mineral springs, there's this huge craze about like health and these crazy waters, and they find out there's lithium in them. So they're like, what if we just package this lithium and start selling it? So like Lithia salts started hitting the shelves. So like in the old German pharmacy, there's this Lithosol Bauer that they would prescribe. They would also sell it in sodas. So there's a Lithia Coke where they mix a Coca-Cola syrup with the Lithia spring water.
Bring that back.
Yeah. and then there was bib label lithiated lemon soda, which was later named 7-Up.
I knew there was a reason I loved 7-Up growing up. Literally every time I was sick, my mom gave us 7-Up, and I was like, healing water.
No, but it is healing water. So 7-Up, I think
7-Up if you want to sponsor this podcast.
7-Up for treatment-resistant depression, question mark?
Question mark, new protocol.
I think
First
it had
patient protocol.
It had 7 ingredients, and one of them was lithium. And if you look at the early bottles of 7-Up, it would say lithiated soda on it. That was like one of the selling points. Yeah. But
I would love to have one of those bottles in my office someday.
How sick would that be?
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Lithiated soda. I want to get one of those like Lithosol Bauer things too. I was looking at pictures of all this stuff. It was really fun. So, but you know, you have all these like housewives that are just like pounding this stuff, trying to feel better, right? And we get the same problem we got with the gout patients, with this a ton of lithium poisoning.
Too much 7-Up poisoning. Mama, slow down.
7-Up every day is just we're getting cooked, guys.
You're greedy. Your greed disgusts me.
So
toxicity for the housewives.
Yeah. And what I was reading, like a lot of it wasn't like acute lithium poisoning like we think about it, where you get like the GI upset and these like neurologic dysfunction. A lot of it was these like chronic diuresis effects. So people get dehydrated, start passing out, getting tired. The other really common sequelae of chronic lithium poisoning is endocrine dysfunction, which is what you mentioned with the thyroid stuff earlier.
Yeah.
So a little bit about that. Your thyroid is dependent on iodine or iodide for its metabolism. And so anytime we have a cat on someone in your body, lithium's like, time to go bully it.
Like me and the thymus.
Like,
the thyroid.
It's like, yeah, I'll catch you in the neck later. Like, it's on site.
On site. I will be taking your...
But actually, like, lithium directly inhibits the thyroid's ability to like take in iodine.
Mm-hmm.
And then also it will bind to the places where iodine binds in thyroglobulin and cause misfolding of it. So it's harder for us to produce thyroid hormone. It actually inhibits T3 converting to T4 peripherally, and you can't take in the iodine. So you're just kind of like, shit. So a lot of people will develop hypothyroidism with their chronic lithium toxicity. So now it's having like the opposite effect. You're drinking way too much lithiated 7-Up. You start getting hypothyroidism. Now you're more tired. Now you have cold intolerance.
Have more 7-Up. Would this happen
and you're
to
fucking
kids?
dehydrated too, because you're pissing everything out.
What if like people, when they drank it when they were pregnant, would it have just the same side effect? This is too deep. This is too deep in the. But I'm wondering if like kids did that. Like if you had like a 4-year-old drinking 7-Up, like I'm thinking, like developmentally, am I thinking about the wrong thing?
No, so pregnant women, if they were drinking too much of it, you can get something called Epstein's anomaly.
Right.
Those are the only birth defects that I'm aware of. And interestingly, like it doesn't actually increase the risk that much. If I recall, like Epstein's anomaly, it's near like a 1 in 3,000, 1 in 4,000 risk.
Yeah,
and it goes to like 2 in 4,000. So it's a 100% increase, but the absolute risk increase is not a lot.
What I was thinking of was, I don't think we call it this anymore. So I'm trying to look for the name of if infants and kids don't get iodine and they get hypothyroidism, it is they don't grow correctly. It used to be called cretinism, but it's called something else now, but I can't find the name. It is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I still saw
congenital
cretinism in my
iodine
Anki
deficiency
cards.
syndrome is now.
Oh,
I know it's
Creedon's a
recently
lot
being
better.
changed that they're like, maybe we shouldn't name it that way.
I
But
remember being
anyway,
called a little cretin by my mom.
your mom's
You
getting
little
canceled,
cretin.
Preston.
And
Your
then-
mom is going to
so
get
that was
canceled
actually-
from this podcast episode.
That was the only way I knew what cretin was. I thought it was just like a misbehaving kid. And then I'm like in med school and they're like, this is cretinism. And I was like, Mom, what the heck? Why
She's like, I didn't know.
do me like that?
I didn't know. I didn't know. Anyway,
Okay, so moving on.
sorry, but it is like iodine insufficiency syndrome is what the actual name of it is. I just looked
Okay.
it up.
Good to know.
7-Up syndrome.
So, and if you actually have the opposite of hypothyroidism, so you have thyroid storm, you can actually use lithium to treat that, weirdly enough. Because everything that we described, it's like inhibition of thyroglobulin and the T3 to T4 conversion.
Mhm.
That's like the mechanism of methimazole or propylthiouracil, which is what we use to treat thyroid storm.
Well, it's also interesting to think about the connection that is still being elucidated between like bipolar disorder and like thyroid concerns, that we always check it, but even there's thought that even controlled like looks normal thyroid and like use of thyroid hormone in different parts of cycling and bipolar can be of use. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to think of like, is lithium also doing something? Is part of its action also there in terms of inhibition? I don't know.
Like, is it stabilizing like hyperactive thyroid function, which could be contributing to psychosis in some way? Yeah, because if you get thyroid storm, you can go into mania or psychosis. And funnily enough, the medication we use is like a derivative of urate. It's uracil, right? So even gout is still back in the mix.
We got
And
it.
they called a lot of it like gouty mania too. They're like, this will help with your gout, but also might help with how weird you act on your gout. You on gout.
Gouty mania.
That was a true quote I saw in there like several times. So, and then I just want to touch on this. This is so nerdy, but these endocrinologists in 2015 published using high dose lithium to treat thyroid storm in a patient. They tried to treat it with her with methimazole, and she had fulminant hepatitis and adverse reactions to like first line treatments. So they just said, "Fuck it, we'll try lithium." Given this like historical thing, and it worked.
Wow.
Which is so wild. Can you imagine how hyped these nerdy endocrinologists would be in your hospital if they treated someone with thyroid storm with lithium in real time?
I want an edit of those three. I got Gucci. I got the same
The
damn
amount of
time.
high fives in the
There's just
parking
an
lot.
edit of those three endocrinologists.
Well, boys, we're about to go where no one's gone before. But theoretically, lithium could treat this thyroid storm. And they're like, oh, damn it, Johnson, let's do it. Her hepatitis is too fulminant. We can't use the methimazole.
Have you ever seen the movie The Fugitive?
No.
It is like one of my favorite scenes. Like basically, the movie is like the guy who's played by, I believe, Harrison Ford is like a cardiologist, Dr. Richard Kimball, and his wife gets murdered and he gets accused of doing it. And spoilers, the end of the movie is at a cardiology conference, and like the whole cover up for his wife, like why his wife got murdered was partially because of like they were lying on the research to get this big cardio drug approved. And he like comes into like a Marriott at the conference and like hits this guy with a chair, and it's just like that. I want that level of cinema to depict these endocrinologists.
I know. It's kind of like them. They're like, I'm giving him the lithium, damn it. They're like mining it themselves. Which is like low-key kind of what happens when we get to it
I
later.
love it.
So kind of back to the story. We're in the 1940s. We have these lithium sodas that we've been taking for wellness, but they also cause all these toxicity problems because we're really overshooting the runway. And then Thorazine hasn't been invented yet, right? Thorazine comes in the 50s, and people are still in institutions. They don't get released until 1962 with the Community Mental Health Act. So this is kind of the state of the psychiatric world right now.
Episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, call back. Now I want to introduce John Cade, an Australian psychiatrist who was the first person to try lithium for psychiatric illness. And he thought it was for gouty mania too.
Whatever. You know, what if they like it, we love it. It got us here.
Yeah. So John Jennings of the FDA described him as the first man to eat an oyster in his prescribing of lithium. And we'll kind of come back to more of this interesting avant-garde story when we have this break.
Margaret and I are very excited to tell you about a healthcare news podcast that just came out called Medlines.
It's a quick weekly wrap up of everything in our field, from breakthrough discoveries and research to politics and, of course, medical pop culture.
I think the best way to conceptualize this podcast is it's like NPR's Up First, but for medicine. So they're short, to the point, with episodes no longer than 15 minutes.
And it's written and created by an amazing team, some of whom you might recognize, Dr. Glockenflecken and Lady Glockenflecken, as well as many people here at the Human Content Podcast Network.
With thanks for their inaugural sponsor, the New England Journal of Medicine. New episodes of Medlines are out wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes out every Friday.
And we're back with the story of John Cade and the rest of the Australian psychiatrists from down under.
You have to do the accent for the next 5 minutes telling this story.
So John Cade was a good old cunt from Melbourne. And he was thinking that these patients was going manic because they gout. He said, oh... Sorry, I didn't stop. But basically, he thought that, similar to doctors before him, that gout was causing these manic episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So he was actually trying to target gout in their brain by giving them trials of lithium. So he put 10 patients on lithium citrate and 10 on lithium carbonate. And much to everyone's surprise, there was a huge improvement. Some of these patients that, and some of the patients that had been like manic psychotic for years and in these custodial cares became so normal that they could return to society.
Wow.
And they were like, people were like amazed by this. And this is in 1949. So he like publishes this humble paper in Australia. And then at the same time, this is like the worst timing, they did another study on congestive heart failure with lithium, where the researchers were like, what if we replace sodium chloride with lithium chloride? You cannot make this stuff up for heart failure treatment.
Okay.
I don't know what they were thinking as to why it would work. I didn't read too much into the paper. But basically, they all got lithium toxicity.
Yeah, it did not work.
It's like, God damn it, guys. So, and then it was really bad in this paper. 2 of the patients died from lithium toxicity because they have congestive heart failure. So like on top of all this stuff, they're not moving fluid through their body. So lithium is just going to accumulate like crazy.
Right.
So then right around the time that John Cade publishes this paper about it being helpful for mania, it's getting all this bad press in the States and everywhere else because people are like, lithium bad, has killed all these patients. So now his paper falls to the wayside and kind of it's like an echo that no one really picks up on. Till a couple years later, when another Melbourne psychiatrist got curious about us, we're still in Australia, and they tried again with 100 patients instead of the original 20. And they found it to be particularly effective for the treatment of mania, though they were like not having any like robust trials yet. They're just seeing that like people are getting better. They were manic, psychotic, and all of a sudden they seem to be like functioning normally again in a way that we've not seen before. Because we have like Thorazine doesn't come out for another 5 years.
Right.
So we don't even have any drugs.
We don't have anything that's working. We just have the malaria seizures that we're inducing, and that's it.
Yeah, and and lobotomies, I guess.
And the lobotomies.
Yeah, that's the competition right now.
And the purposely crashing blood sugars, comas. We have those options.
Yeah, and then in other specialties, the Tuskegee trials are still going on. So interesting time for science. But moving forward, the Danish actually were the first to try a real trial with it. So they were paying attention to what the Australians were doing. This guy, Morgan Schau, made the first controlled trial for lithium where they actually like flipped a coin to randomize patients. And there were, I'm seeing 18 total manic patients, but I think I saw earlier there was about 35 in the study. Anyways, he did shifts with medications in this one. So he started people on placebo and then switched them to lithium, and then started them on lithium and switched them to placebo. And then he also thought that it was the carbonate that might be doing something. So they gave one group just carbonate because of the lithium carbonate.
Yeah.
Right. And what they found was that there was a huge difference in two groups. The group that was switched from placebo to mania, they saw like 40 more observations of decreased mania. And in the group that was switched from lithium to placebo, they saw people having more mania. So we had a bi-directional relationship now. You switch someone to lithium, their mania goes away. You switch someone off lithium, their mania comes back. That was a really powerful study at the time. Because now it's more than just, oh, we're giving someone this drug and we're seeing that they like actually get better. It's not like getting better concomitantly. It's like we're seeing the effect on both sides. So momentum begins. People are starting to prescribe it a little bit more in Europe. We run into the same problem. Round 3, everyone gets lithium toxicity.
You're like, you're too much.
Like, fuck. So, what was great actually is in 1958, they came up with a new phenometer that was able to accurately detect like phonometry, where you use like, I don't know much about
that's
science.
okay. I've never
Basically,
heard that word.
it's a lab instrument that you use to detect metals in solutions. And so it helped them give more accurate readings of lithium. That's all you need to know. So
I'm
we
just
started
picturing
getting...
you. I'm sorry. I'm picturing you being like someone coming into your like private practice someday, and it's like you have like a real microscope and like a phonometer and like just hanging out in your psychiatry office. I'm sorry. Continue.
Yeah, we're a one-stop shop here. This is
we're
the
beating
upgraded
the
phenometer. Don't
psychiatrist
worry.
didn't go to med school allegations every day.
So, we're now to like the late 50s, early 60s, and in 1960 was the first time the U.S. did anything with lithium. And of all places, it was Michigan.
Michigan.
University of Michigan, yeah. So this guy Gershon, he was reading all of the trials and success with lithium, and with some help from the National Institute of Mental Health, he got funding from them. He was like, I'm going to try treating these patients with lithium, but we don't have any like lithium being prescribed in pharmacies. It's not like medicinal grade in any way here in the US, not really elsewhere either. I guess he could go find 7-Up, but instead he goes to these chemical supply stores and just buys lithium.
I feel like we're going to get lithium toxicity again.
and then he goes to the pharmacy and was like, can you put this in a capsule? And they're like, okay. So it's literally just like, okay, and then I go to the hardware store, and then I carry my fucking tub of lithium back over to the pharmacy, and they break it up and put it into the capsules. And then they were giving to patients, but it was working. Like they were seeing like pretty effective responses. And Gershon, he later moves to St. Louis and then to New York Medical College. Yeah, where he became one of the prominent researchers in lithium after that. And then a year later, in 1961-62, Wash U starts running a similar operation.
Gang, gang.
Yeah, yeah.
Gang, gang.
So, did you rotate at Barnes Hospital?
Girl, did I rotate at Barnes Hospital? Yes, there's a comment in one of our Instagram posts for shout out our podcast as an Instagram, where one of my prior, like the resident I had when I was a med student, it was the video where we were talking about like crying or something in the hospital, and she commented like, glad to know other people also cry in Barnes Jewish, and I go, I know those the best spots for crying. So yes, I have.
Okay, you cried in Barnes Hospital. Well,
maybe I could have used lithium during that.
You probably could have. So they were doing kind of a similar thing where they were just like buying this lithium. I don't know if they're going to the chemical supply store, but they were having the pharmacy on site basically package them into capsules.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this patient who had failed Thorazine in 18 trials of ECT, because Thorazine's been on the market for like 5 years or so now. But he got better with lithium. And everyone in Barnes was like, hot dog. So after like that kind of crazy case report, lithium became like one of the mainstays of treatment at Barnes. And they were kind of one of the leaders in the area for a while in adopting lithium. And it's kind of important to note that because there's almost like a gap between Europe and the US as far as their attitudes go towards lithium. The US in general is kind of like the last to adopt lithium, and they're kind of the most suspicious consistently, which has been like kind of strange for me. So over the next decade or so, now this is the 60s, they run 4 more randomized control trials in like Sussex. The NIMH does one. New York Hospital of Cornell does one. And they overall report a response rate of about 78% for mania with lithium, which is wild. Like we don't see numbers like that in psychiatry for response rate ever.
Not now. Not even now.
Yeah. This is like being taken up by all the psychiatry hospitals or across Europe. So France, Germany, Italy, UK, they all start manufacturing medical grade lithium salts. The only difference is some people are like, oh, we'll try lithium citrate, we'll try lithium carbonate, try dilithium something. And the US is like, no. The FDA like refuses to approve it.
But like entirely?
It just at this time in the 60s, they hadn't
like
hadn't
every
caught
form
on
of
yet.
lithium, though it was like no girl.
So they were kind of they were accepting of these like investigational new drug applications for some people to try to like get permission to use lithium, but a lot of people ended up just kind of doing what they did in Michigan and at WashU, and this like underground lithium culture started in psychiatry. Yeah. Where people would just kind of be like, I know lithium works, so I'm just gonna fucking use it.
Yeah.
And actually we kind of bullied the FDA into approving it. So in 1969, I didn't write down his name, but a psychiatrist came out on TV and basically said, I'm going to use lithium whether or not the FDA approves it because it's just like that good. And then in 1970, the US finally becomes the 50th country to approve the use of lithium for bipolar disorder. Which is not, we're a little bit behind.
Yeah.
On that one.
That's interesting. I like, was it just thought maybe the like, we were so scared by that one study, or that was it the like anti-Europe, Europe doesn't know what we're doing, American centralizing, that's like, we can't trust their science, or?
Maybe. I'm really not sure, actually. So I guess I was perusing through most of this and kind of seeing, and I can only guess as like to the differences right now. But I think there's kind of a lot of differences in the way that like Europe and the US practice psychiatry, and even outside of like lithium and some of these other like medicines that we use, like agomelatine, I think we've mentioned earlier, is like a melatonin agonist and an SSRI combined.
Right.
But similarly, like there was like some toxicity that we saw in one of our trials and we just pulled it from our markets, but Europe uses it like pretty much without consequence. So yeah, I think we could do another episode on like where we do a deep dive on like differences in like the cultures.
We'll get someone actually from Australia.
Yeah, actually that'd be really interesting. And I think a lot of the culture and how you prescribe medicines or how you do surgery, it's almost like apprenticeship. It's like passed down.
Yes.
So the person before you wasn't excited about lithium, so you're not going to be excited about lithium. So you're going to teach your med students to not be excited about lithium, and it just kind of continues like that. I think there might be like an aspect of that in both of these different cultures. So, kind of after it was approved in 1970, we started having some of these lithium clinics pop up. And there's one set up in the West Park in Epsom that started following all of their patients that they were prescribing lithium for. And their main outcome they were interested in was suicide. So they found that the standard rate of, or the median rate of suicide for the patients that were coming through their clinic was about 7 in 1,000. But in this group that was treated with lithium, it dropped down to 1 per 1,000.
Wow.
So they were seeing significant decreases in suicidality across the board. And it's interesting because now in the 70s, they started looking at lithium for its prophylactic benefits, because before everyone's worried about treating mania, but we had other ways of treating mania. ECT was really effective for treating mania, and we'd also just basically blast people with barbiturates. until their mania would go away. And both of those were kind of effective, but what we really sucked at was keeping the mania from coming back.
Yeah.
And that's where lithium made its money. That's where it was. It's worth its weight in gold, or worth its weight in lithium, I would say. So a meta-analysis kind of like looking at all these now prophylactic measures in the 90s found that the relapse rate for depression was 74% for patients on placebo or didn't receive any treatment, and it dropped to 29% on lithium.
Wow.
So there's almost a 60% reduction in relapse of depression. So not only does it prevent mania from coming back, but also prevents depression. Like it's, in every sense of the word, a true mood stabilizer.
And was that in patients who'd never had mania before? Or just in bipolar?
That was in, I guess described as manic depressive patients back then. Mm-hmm. So it was in bipolar depression. And then, so a lot of this information has come from an article on the history of mania. And I actually want to read an excerpt from it right here, which I found poignant. In retrospect, the miracle of lithium was not in its treatment of acute mania, as Dennis Charney at Yale University put in a 1995 meeting of the Psychopharmacologic Drug Advisory Committee. Neuroleptics or even high-dose benzodiazepines are quite effective in treating acute mania. The issue was always prevention of relapse. The paper continues, with the exception of ECT, lithium is the single most effective treatment in psychiatry. Its side effects are easily managed, and many patients stay on low-dose lithium for decades. Its benefits in terms of relief of mania and prophylaxis of depression are incalculable. So it's a really powerful medication, but I've also found, and now I'm talking like from personal anecdote, a lot of people are hesitant to prescribe lithium.
Yeah.
And I found that when someone comes in and they're acutely manic, most of the time, either like my colleagues or my like supervisors will recommend starting with Depakote.
That's interesting.
And that
like
also could be like an institution thing
been like,
too.
no, my institution's like lithium.
Yeah. And I have some attendings that are very like lithium forward, I guess. But there is some interesting commentary on it that I read in the paper too, where some people were really trying to vilify and like play up the side effects and toxicity parts of it, while also pushing the use of Depakote or other like anti-epileptic medications as mood stabilizers. So kind of the paper in the history of mania concludes actually by talking about these almost like political campaigns that people have had about trying to use Depakote instead of lithium for the treatment of mania, even though every way that we can measure the two drugs competing side by side for lithium, both the treatment of acute mania and prophylaxis, lithium outperforms Depakote.
Yeah. That's interesting because again, anecdotally, my experience has been more lithium forward. Like we very rarely an outpatient prescribe lithium. Prescribe Depakote. We very rarely prescribe Depakote. We kind of only use Depakote once, like, and an inpatient even. It's like we would use it in patients where like other things weren't working and there was like persistent aggressive and violent behaviors. But like my institution's pretty avoidant of Depakote side effects.
Yeah. Personally, I don't like Depakote that much. I think it kind of stuperizes people. It makes you dopey. It causes weight gain, like worse than lithium would. So I don't know. That's the reason why I'm doing this whole episode. I love lithium. I think it's a good drug.
I think the thing that comes up when we can't do lithium, or like one of the things that comes up is the use of it in an illness where being able to like go get troughs and like get lab levels and keep someone in the persnickety window of lithium, like depending on how sick someone is, I think that part can be a limiting factor in how good it is as an agent, because it is quite an active process compared to like antipsychotics, even compared to Depakote.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I think personally for me, like where I'll also choose Depakote or Lamictal or something over lithium is if someone has kidney problems or they have like, actually in San Antonio, if you're unhoused, because it gets so hot out, people get like dehydrated.
Yes.
Like being on lithium wouldn't be like helpful for them. They could actually get in serious trouble. But yeah, it's like you said, if they're so medically sick that we can't keep them safely.
No, I mean if they're psychiatrically sick.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think, and
I
I think,
guess
I mean,
all types of sick.
I'm this maybe, I wonder how you'll feel a year from now when you've done more outpatient, because the, to me, the thing is like, if you have someone who no-shows 50% of their outpatient appointments, after that happens a few times, it becomes way less clear whether lithium would be the right agent for them, not as like a punitive thing, but because it's like, if we're how comfortable are you prescribing if someone may never get labs and will not show for 8 months at a time?
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily go towards Depakote then. It's usually more like second gen or like lamotrigine or something. But like,
Yeah, sure.
I feel like lithium in the hospital setting versus lithium in outpatient is kind of a different ballgame.
Yeah, totally.
But agree,
Okay.
it's still great. It's still I want people to be on lithium rather than Depakote, but it's like, will this stuff actually happen for
Mm-hmm.
keeping lithium safe?
What do they say in peds? The best medicine is the one the patient can take.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up the history part of it, I want to segue us into a little bit about the mechanism of lithium. And this part will be short because, to be honest, we don't understand a lot about how it works. And I think part of this comes from we also don't understand a ton about how mania works either. So we have like a clearer pathway in something like schizophrenia or psychosis where we understand that like increased disinhibited dopamine in some of these pathways can cause psychosis. Mania and depression happen across a lot of functional and anatomical networks and structures in the brain that are really hard to pin down. But we do know that lithium does a couple things. So we know it releases brain-derived neurotropic factor, which can help with preserving and actually sometimes increasing brain volume in the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and hippocampus. These are regions that regulate memory and emotion. It also decreases the release of glutamate and dopamine, which are related to psychosis and also excitotoxicity. It increases the release of GABA, it reduces oxidative stress, and it lowers apoptotic processes or the destruction of cells. As far as like how this helps with mania, how social psychosis, there's not a clear link, but we know that it's probably interrelated to all of these functions. So, in summary, long ago, we had a couple of black holes and supernovas, a couple stars dancing around each other that combined to make these weird lithium salts, circled and formed our planets. They deposit in our hot springs that we've been going to for centuries to help with our mood. Then we figured out that we can take it out, bottle it up, distill it in a salt, and actually use it to treat our mental illness. There's all these wonderful magical things. So every time that you're prescribing lithium, just remember you're prescribing stardust that was formed in a black hole, which is pretty fun.
And loves the thyroid.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk at all about prescribing it?
Yeah, we can. That actually kind of comes to the end of everything I had to talk about. So if you want to move on to prescribing it.
Oh, okay. We'll just talk about a little bit. If you guys want to hear more about like formulations and prescribing it, I don't think there's a ton of it. I mean, I guess the first question is, what actually is lithium toxicity? Like, what do you look for if someone comes back to you and says, hey, doc, the lithium's been working great. I had some knee pain for a couple months, so I started taking ibuprofen. And the knee pain feels better, but then suddenly I started shitting. This is like just like actually what happens.
Yeah.
So what do you look for in lithium toxicity?
So initially, like you mentioned, you look for GI upset.
Mm-hmm.
You can look, and then like we already mentioned, signs of like dehydration. So like fatigue, cold intolerance, and then numbness and tingling can happen too.
Mm-hmm.
So basically GI symptoms, mild neurologic symptoms, and then total volume status disruption.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you mentioned in some of the history is there's also like a difference between someone suddenly having a lot more like lithium in their body and that being like acute toxicity versus like chronic effects on the body from being in lithium. And so I think one of the things to think about is the chronic impact in terms of thyroid can be a big deal for a lot of people, right? They can end up needing supplementation. The GI stuff long term is not as much as you're saying. It's the short term kind of acute change in dose that we worry about. But then the long term chronic impacts can be from like a CNS perspective, like a tremor, like ataxia, as you mentioned, short term, but also can be long term.
Mhm.
There can be more rare things than like what I won't mention right now. But then the big thing is chronic kidney issues from lithium long term, which can happen even without, you know, being in the toxicity necessarily, right? So I think that's like the concern also for lithium for people is it's worth it and you can monitor things and you can treat these other parts, but um, renal function can be a big kind of limiting thing, especially depending
Mhm.
on like how healthy are their kidneys from other stuff as we move into like geriatrics. Like,
Mhm.
how is their renal function? How is their vascular and metabolic function impacting renal clearance? Um, the interesting thing with that is like people who are on dialysis, it's actually much easier to do dosing of lithium by working with like the renal team. But people who are like somewhere in the chronic kidney disease spectrum, it is harder um, to figure out because with like once you reach
Yeah.
the point of dialysis, like you can work with them to
Everything's
kind of
regular.
right, like you can figure it out. But when you're in this spectrum of like failing kidneys, how do you dose it? How quickly are those things changing? Can be a great time to talk to nephrology and work together as a team. Um, Other things, I guess I would say, just in terms of prescribing, you mentioned that we start. I feel like I usually start outpatient with like when if someone's not like necessarily acutely manic or danger, starting with like 300 or 600 at night and then going to BID dosing, so twice a day dosing, usually ending up somewhere between like 900 and 1200 milligrams total per day, and eventually trying to get all of the dose at night because it's renal protective if people take it at night while you're sleeping. So technically, if someone worked at night, I don't think this would be true. But before you sleep, there's like a change in how much it's hitting like the kidneys and like being filtered in different way by some being lying down versus like being up and around, which is odd, but
Mm.
is a thing. So you eventually, if you can, for some people, if it's tolerable to take the dose just at night, and they sleep at night, so they're not a healthcare nighttime worker, it is
Mhm.
important for the renal protective part of it. Um, I think that's the other thing that again always talk to people about is anything that can impact their kidney function or then their volume status. So you mentioned a little bit about like heart failure, but a big time we think about it is in pregnancy. So it's contraindicated in the first trimester or when people are trying to conceive. But after that, people can talk with their psychiatrist and consider going back on it once the heart has formed in terms of
Mm.
the Epstein anomaly. And so lithium, but also in terms of dosing, some people stay on it even throughout because the risk of a manic episode or a significant depressive episode during pregnancy is more dangerous than the 1 in whatever 1,000 risk of Epstein is um, the volume status changes. And so the lithium dose has to change in accordance with the mother's volume
Yeah.
status. And then also you ask them about dehydration, like you're saying, so changes in heat, but also any pain where they start taking. You'll be surprised how many people are just like knocking back ibuprofen every day, every single day.
And if you're a med student listening, that's like a very classic either shelf or board question that you'll get where some patient will come in, they'll kind of try to mask it. They'll be like, he had a manic episode and they started him on a medication, and they'll be kind of like cagey about it in the question stem, but then they'll start taking ibuprofen or they'll get like a UTI or something or an AKI and then immediately start shitting their pants and
Yeah.
having
You're
attacks.
like, what's going on? And then the range that we look at, so just in terms of very basics, although again, if people want this episode, we can go more into this. After you start lithium, 5 days after you start it, like you get a trough level. Usually once they're more in the like above 600 total daily dose range, and you have them take it 12 hours after taking it if they're or 12 hours after taking it at night before they would take the morning dose if they're BID. And you want them to be generally within the like zero point 0.8 to 1.2 range. But some people will have an effect at like lower than that. And some
Mhm.
people will need to be higher on the scale. Yeah.
Interestingly, all the kind of studies that I was talking about in the 50s and 60s, they were shooting for about zero point 0.8 for all of those
Mhm.
patients. So they were on like the lower end of what we consider the therapeutic range now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else.
And with a lot of things, it's like you treat for effect. I guess when you're treating mania more so, but with prophylaxis, I think you'd still want to get to the therapeutic window.
Yeah. I will
Because
say, what's your experience been with like actually using lithium acutely for mania? Because I feel like we usually now use like in the emergency and inpatient setting, we use the atypical or we use antipsychotics and then start them on lithium and
Mhm.
monitor.
If somebody is acutely manic and agitated, we often will do antipsychotics. So I'll usually do like olanzapine 10 or something with an IM backup. And then we'll schedule benzos sometimes, like what they do, like what they were talking about. And then I'll usually start them on lithium either that day or the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I don't use it. Because you know how there's like some chart from like boards prep that's like acute mania versus, like long ongoing on and off, or like, is it hypomania? What is it? And having
Mhm.
very different choices. But I feel like in the ED, I think also like if someone's in the emergency department with mania, it's usually pretty significant, like
Yeah.
disruptive mania to them and they've
Yeah,
gotten
exactly.
brought in by someone else.
So like I've had some patients that like they do end up in the emergency department and they're really hyperactive, but they're pleasant,
Yeah.
And then it was really just they became at the behest of a family member and they're agreeable, and it's just because they've noticed this like change in their status. Those might not be patients that will like start with atypical antipsychotics. You may just offer them lithium from the
hmm
beginning, and they'll
hmm
be okay with it. But the patients that are getting agitated and like having these like behavioral codes, we'll lean
Yeah.
more on the atypicals.
Yes. As with many of our meds, lithium can also impact the heart, can long term cause myocarditis. So, and then also, though, needs an EKG if they're going to be on it for QTC stuff and just other arrhythmias, which I don't know how much of that is similar to other QT prolonging, like in the antipsychotics, as much as it may be related as well to these changes in renal function and therefore like electrolyte balance.
Hmm.
So that's clinical lithium.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, that's me vomiting that at you guys. Sorry, but I figure you might want it.
Thank you for tying that up in a bow at the end. I think this will be really helpful for anyone who's like clinical, who's like, I was hoping to get a lithium tip at some point through this. And I'm just like, no, we're talking about the drama of
And you're
these
like, but you
nerds.
have this. Hey, now they have part one of as much as they could want about lithium,
Hmm.
but
But this was fun for me. I think I kind of want to do other elements now. I wish we used
maybe
more,
that should be a
more
solo
elements.
episode.
We should use more elements to treat psych illness.
Yeah, or just go outside and be like, what do we got going on? What
Yeah,
can I? What?
just throw a dart at the periodic table. I was like, oh, like when I was reading about like the cathodes and anodes and lithium, I was like, I miss chemistry. I was a chem major. I'm like, this is fun. I liked learning about this.
We are falling into our archetypes again.
Yeah.
You're like, I was a chem major, and I was like, I was theology. So
Well, it's the
the
perfect
brains
place for us to
choose
meet.
what the brains
Hmm.
choose.
Yep.
Good job. I know
Yeah.
more about this. I'll try out your Stardust line. See in the
Okay.
emergency department.
I actually use that with people where I'll say like, people used to go to lithium springs back in the day to help them with their mood. It's technically a natural compound like anything else. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess. You gotta appeal to the inner granola in all of us.
It's
You know,
technically natural.
it's you can't create or destroy it.
I feel like
You know.
mania is like one of the things that like you like one of the things in psychiatry training in particular where you're in the emergency department enough that you do eventually see real mania. And the first time you see it, I feel like sometimes you're immediately, it's mania, but sometimes it's like, as an intern, I feel like that I saw it for the first time and I was like, what's going on? Like, are they intoxicated? Like, what's happening? And
Hmm.
had done a lot of psych rotations. And they're like, that is the truest case of mania I've ever seen. And I was like, oh. So
Hmm.
we take for granted, I think, having Thorazine and having lithium in modern psychiatry,
Yeah.
but there was only sedation before.
Yeah, and there was a time where probably a lot more manic people were running around.
Yeah. I mean, I think that therapy side of bipolar is super interesting. Like in terms of when you're managing someone, like how do you make sense of if you feel happy that that's almost a dangerous trigger for you? Like that it's like, am I about to be manic? There, we could have the whole discussion on bipolar and people who are creative and the history of the artist there that like the
Yeah.
bipolar mania feels like and may actually be the time they are more creative, even though it's like not sustainable.
Yeah, it's like they put themselves into overdrive and then cut an album, and it's crazy. Or
Yeah,
it's
and
graduation. It's really good.
allegedly. And like you can't, I mean, I think that it's like a true grief, like to have like in that. Like I don't think there's like, I think sometimes people will go to psychiatrists and they'll be like, well, you just need to not. And it's like, I get the like question for your life. Like if you're someone who feels like the only good times, like you feel like you're in depression or you're that, like it's hard to be judgmental when someone's in this illness and you haven't been in this illness. And like,
Yeah.
what would you choose? Like, I don't know. I honestly do not know what I would choose if I had to make that choice for my own self.
I mean, I feel weird saying this as a psychiatrist, but like from the outside looking in, being manic seems awesome. Like you feel on top of the world. Like you can accomplish, and like who wouldn't want to feel that way? You know?
Yeah. Well, especially if you're in between periods of depression.
Yeah. And like it's destructive to you, and you recognize that like ultimately it's a negative on your life or has this negative impact on your life, but it's a great feeling in the moment. Like, so
I think we need to do another bipolar episode where we talk about like diagnosis and like also like, is the thyroid involved? Like mixed states, what are those? Is there such a thing as bipolar 3 and bipolar 4? Why do some people take an SSRI and it makes them become hypomanic? We got a lot to say about bipolar
You're
spectrum.
right. We really kind of started at lithium and then came in was like
we started with
to
the
touch on
stars.
bipolar. Yeah. But next time we can start with bipolar. And I would have a lot of fun going into the history of bipolar too. I think there's a lot of fun characters.
And I have a lot of fun going
bipolar.
into the modern clinical practice. Preston's like, what if we did a story? Like, okay, I'm not going to give you guys information on prescribing at you primary care doctors, but
let me have fun.
I am letting you have fun. I do let you have fun. I like learning from your stories. I'm going to dunk on in this episode.
Well, all that being said, if you're a listener here, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for bringing us along for your car rides and your dog walks. And if you're in a coffee shop right now, close your laptop.
For your gout
ending.
attacks.
Yeah. Let us know how the show is. If you like these Preston-led episodes where we talk about a single molecule or a single atom. And I'm not implying that you don't like them. I just just asking them.
It's like people being nice to me and not as...
Come chat with us and our fun human content podcast family on Instagram and TikTok at Human Content Pods or at our How to Be Patient Instagram page. We have 2,399 Instagram followers now, so you have the rare opportunity to be the 2,400th.
Early investor. You can visit,
ground
you can get
floor.
on our wait list for visiting those wells with lithium in them.
You can always see more from me and Margaret on our respective Instagram pages. So I'm at It's Presro, Margaret's at Bad Art Every Day. You can also find full versions of this podcast on my YouTube at It's Presro. And then you can find us audio or video on Spotify and then also on Apple and anywhere else you get your podcasts, most likely. I guess I always say everywhere you get your podcast, but I don't know where people get podcasts. Like, they might get them from weird places. Thanks again for listening. We're your hosts, Preston Roche and Margaret Duncan. Our executive producers are Preston Roche, Margaret Duncan, Will Flannery, Kristen Flannery, Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brooke. Our editor and engineer is Jason Bortizo. Our music is by Omer Benzvi. To learn more about our program disclaimer and ethics policies, submission verifications, and licensing terms, and our HIPAA release terms, go to howtobepatientpod.com or reach out to us at howtobepatient@human-content.com with any questions or concerns. How to Be Patient is a human content production.
Thank you for watching. If you want to see more of us, or if you want to see, this is Lilac, she's my cat. She's going to be waving her hand at one of the floating boxes, which will lead to more episodes. Lilac, point to the other episodes. Lilac doesn't know what the internet is, but I swear they're there. They probably exist for real. But in the meantime, I'm just going to pet Lilac, and then I'm going to go dance in the background.